here the creator of Blitz, and he will show us how we can easily and super quickly implement full stack apps using Blitz.js. Brendan, the stage is yours.
Hello, hello. It's good to be here today. Thank you for having me. And let me arrange a couple things. All right, so I am the creator of Blitz.js. So you're going to get it straight from the horse's mouth, as they say. So I'll start with why does Blitz exist and the backstory behind it. So I was building full stack React apps for a few years, and I happily put up with the complexity and struggle required to do so. And I did that because I loved building UIs with React more than any other way. But the honeymoon ended, and I became increasingly frustrated with REST APIs, GraphQL APIs, state libraries, managing servers and deployments and making decisions. Anything that got in the way of me building features slowly depleted my morale. I really wanted to love full stack web development again. I wanted to be extremely productive again. I wanted to focus on building features instead of just managing all these other complexities that had nothing to do with features for my users. So I decided enough was enough, and I set out to build the best possible developer experience for building full stack React apps. So there were two things that I really wanted, two things that I had to have for building like a full stack framework type of thing. And the first one is that it had to be monolithic. My background was in Ruby on Rails. That's how I got into web development. I was doing C and C++ before that. I'm glad that's gone. But Ruby on Rails is monolithic, and it's just all in one code base. It's just one thing. It's just so simple and fast. And so this was one thing that I really wanted, this monolithic developer experience. Secondly is no API. And the API layer in React apps is like the biggest source of complexity, frustration, bugs, all kinds of headache. And it even more so than you might realize until you take it away, and then it's like, what in the world just happened? Like, feels like you're skating on ice or something. And so this also was inspired by Ruby on Rails because there's no API, right? It's just, you can like literally read from the database inside your UI in Rails. Like, you probably shouldn't, but you can. And so it's just so fast, like to add features and stuff, because there's no API, you're not duplicating code and things all over the place. And so I wanted to get rid of this with React. But how can we do this? Like, the only way that I really knew was to do the same type of server-side rendering only approach that Rails does. And I was like, well, okay, let's just go with that. In fact, the first announcement just over a year ago of Blitz, the initial prototype was server-side rendered. But I wasn't happy with it. I didn't love it. And so the other early Blitz contributors and myself were trying all sorts of things and discussing like, what is Blitz really going to be? And one day I was laying in a hammock in Thailand thinking about this. And I asked myself, what would it look like if it was easy? And so I thought, well, if it was easy, I could write a function that would run on the server where I could talk to my database, and I could import that function directly into my React component and just use it like a local function there. And so there would like be no API. And I thought, wow, that would be amazing. I wonder if we can make it happen. And yeah, sure enough, we did, made it happen. So I'll show you how that works later. But first, let's go into a bit more of the basics about what Blitz is. The first thing to know is that Blitz is built on top of Next.js. So you've probably heard about Next. If you haven't, it's a hybrid React framework. So it's a super solid foundation for building any type of React site you can imagine, because it supports basically everything that you could think of, such as it supports client-side rendering. So the same thing as like create React app. It supports server-side rendering. It supports static page generation. So like Gatsby, you can do the same type of thing. And also it has API routes. So you can do server-side stuff. So it's everything you need. So it's already battle tested. People love it. And so it's a perfect thing to build on top of. And because Next is pretty minimal, like it doesn't provide very much from a framework perspective. And so Blitz adds everything else you need on top of that for building like a real application. So let's talk about the foundational principles of Blitz, or I'm just going to list them here. Number one is full stack and monolithic, which I already touched on. API not required. Again, I mentioned it already. And then number three, convention over configuration. This means that by default, things just work, that you don't have to drown in a bunch of configuration just to get going. I think like Webpack would be the opposite of this, right? And so we just want to make it simple, let you go, but then also have ability to configure things if you want to, but you don't have to. Number four, loose opinions. Now, this is kind of out of the box. Most of the time people talk about strong opinions, loosely held or something like that, but we have loose opinions. So what this means is we have opinions and recommendations on how to do things, like how to structure your files, but we don't enforce those. There's very, very little that we actually enforce. And so, or that we depend on or anything. And so it's really easy to just sort of blaze your own trail if you want to. And this is in contrast to Ruby on Rails, which is very hard to go outside the box with. Number five, easy to start, easy to scale. Now, this is like, it has to be easy to get going, make an MVP, side project, etc. But it also has to be easy to scale. It's no good if something is just great for a side project, but then when you try to build a real business around it, then it falls apart. And like one of these cases is Firebase, for example. And so we want to avoid that. Number six, stability. In this pre 1.0 era that we're in right now with Blitz, stability is pretty much not there. You know, it's fast and loose. But once we get to 1.0, we're going to implement a stable, predictable release cycle inspired by Ember. And so releases will be in beta for a certain period of time before they hit, you know, the full stable release. And so it'll be kind of a nice breath of fresh air in the fast-paced world of JavaScript. And lastly, community over code. This means that like we highly value people over code. Like it's more important that the people get along than that we have like the highest pinnacle of code quality or whatever. So we just, in general, we highly value community. All right. So from your perspective of like, how does Blitz change your life? The first things you'll notice is that when you set up a new Blitz app, there's a bunch of menial setup that's already done for you that you don't even have to worry about. So for example, we give you a folder structure that's already set up, so you don't have to think too much about that. We set up ESLint, it's already configured, and it just works with all the standard stuff that you want for hooks and everything. We have Prettier set up, so it's already formatting your code, and we have Husky, so it will format your code when you run git commit. We have Jest and a full like test harness environment set up, and so you can just straight away start writing tests without setting up like mocks and stuff. We already have a router mock for you, so it's pretty quick there. And then also a database. So by default, it comes with an SQLite database, but you can easily switch that to Postgres or MySQL or anything else that you want. But we give you a database by default. and we give you forms. So we have a form abstraction, and we let you choose between React Final Form, Formic, and React Hook Form. So it's easy to we have that set up by default. And the big one is user sign up, log in, and log out is already done. Let me say that again. You don't have to set up authentication with Blitz. It's already set up for you. So immediately after creating a new app, you can create a new user and you can log in, log out. And then we also have reset password flow. So it's already done for you. Which is just one of my favorite features, because I don't think anyone really enjoys setting up authentication. Although it was really fun for me to build this in Blitz, which is kind of funny, but it's because I was doing it one time, like once and for all for everybody. So hooray. All right, now another big piece that we have in Blitz by default is Prisma, which is a next generation ORM for Node and TypeScript. Now, Prisma is in there by default. We think it's the best developer experience, but it's not required. You can take Prisma out and use Fauna, for example, or anything, DynamoDB or anything else. Now, Prisma is really awesome because it gives you it manages your database schema. So if you don't know about databases, SQL databases, how they work is you have to run migrations. So if you want to add data to your database, like and add a new table, like a user table, you have to somehow send SQL statements to that database to say, hey, create a table with user, and it has columns of ID, email, name, etc. And so if you want to add another field, you have to send more SQL statements to do that. But who wants to write SQL statements? Not me. So what Prisma does is they provide you with the schema file that's very much like a GraphQL syntax. It's pretty easy to understand. And then you run Prisma migrate, and it will declaratively take this thing and generate the SQL needed to update your database. So it's super easy for managing your database. And then secondly, it provides a database client that is auto-generated from your schema, including with like autocomplete support. So it's with TypeScript, it has fully typed, and then for JavaScript, you still get the autocomplete. And it's just a really awesome DB client. So it's just like writing, I'll show you it later, but you don't have to know SQL. So it's pretty sweet. All right, now let's talk about this zero API data layer thing is what we call it. So what happens is we abstract the API into a compile step. So there is indeed an API at runtime, an HTTP API between the front end and the back end. But as a developer, you don't have to really know about it or mess with it unless you're doing something really complex. So we let you import server code directly into your front end. And the server code will it's called Blitz queries and mutations. And so they will be in queries folders and mutations folders, very, very much like pages folders are in Next.js, where it automatically converts to pages. Queries and mutations folders automatically convert to queries and mutations. And these are plain asynchronous JavaScript functions that you always run on the server. And yeah, so they're just like very simple functions that just run code. But then, of course, you can add API if you need to, like a REST API or GraphQL API. So here's a diagram of sort of how this works. So on the right side, at the top right, we have the purple block that is a client-side rendered page. And at the bottom right, we have a get listing query and an update listing mutation. And so the green boxes at the bottom right are the code only runs on the server. And this dotted line vertically here indicates that you're importing this function into this other page. And then at runtime, this gray box is automatically generated for you. So each query and mutation has its own endpoint. that you can use if you need to, but you don't even have to know about it for the most part. All right, so let's go look at some code. Okay, so I have just created a new app here. I have ran Blitz new meetup, and I picked my form library, and you can see that there's quite a few files that it created for me. And this can be a little bit overwhelming, but keep in mind that we have set it up so that this is ready for a production application. So we have everything in here, or not everything, but we have all the common basic stuff that you need for real applications in here. And so we're not optimizing for just a quick like MVP, like, wow, this is so simple. But then once you start trying to do something real, then you have to keep looking up docs and adding files and whatever. So take your time with it. Don't be overwhelmed. And I think, you'll come to enjoy it. So we automatically install dependencies, set up your database, etc. And then over here on the right side, I have ran Blitz dev. So it just starts the server. And this output is very familiar if you know about Next.js. So let's go to the browser. And this is what you get by default. So just a simple page, but there's a sign up and a login button. So let's go ahead and sign up. Let me just hide that thing. All right. So I'm going to create an account, and ta-da, I'm logged in. Okay, so I wrote zero code for that. This is just out of the box Blitz. I've already logged in. Isn't that awesome? And then log out, of course, works and everything. So this is super cool. Now, let's go ahead and add, let's say we're going to build a project management app. And so we're going to add a project. And so what I'm going to do is go back to the terminal, and I'm going to run this command, blitz generate all project and name. So this is going to generate all files that can possibly be generated, and it's going to be a project model, and then it's going to have a name attribute. And I could add something else, another attribute there if I wanted, but I'll just leave this for now. So we run this, and it creates a number of files for us. Right. So right here is all the files it creates, and this is all the files for CRUD operations: create, read, update, delete. And so we'll start with the pages. So you have a page for listing all the projects. You have a page for creating a project, a page for viewing a single project, and then a page for editing a single project. Okay, so those are all the 4 fundamental pages you have, and we generate those for you by default, exactly, as a recommended pattern. And then for queries and mutations, we also have the 5 possible operations, which are get a single project, get a list of projects, create a project, delete a project, and update a project. Okay, so those are all scaffolded out, ready for you to customize if you need. But I'll show you that they work right now in a simple way. And then we also have a project form. Okay, and then lastly, it added a model to our schema file, schema.prisma. And this model that it added has a ID field, created that, updated that, and that name string field. Okay, so this is already ready to go. And that's that Prisma migration thing I told you about. So let's just run this server again. Extra slow since I'm streaming here. Okay, so let's go back to the browser and reload this. Still loading. All right, and now we're going to go to /projects. All right, so now this is showing us a list of projects, but it's empty, right? Because we haven't created anything yet. So I'm going to click create project, and that takes us to the new page, and we'll just create a project. And now we're on project /1, which is the ID of 1 here. And so now you can see that thing. We could delete it here, or we can click edit, and that will take you to project /1/edit. And then here we have the same field, and we can update, and then we go back to the projects list, and there it is. Okay, so that is everything you need end to end for doing this. So it's what we have is like, it's really awesome what we have, but yet it's still so far away from what we want to get to for this code generation stuff. We're going to be adding things where it'll like you can add a field later, and it'll automatically add the field to your form here, but we're not there yet. We want to add custom templates so that you can make this code that's generated match your existing app. So that's going to be really cool, but this is a good start. Okay, so let's go look at some of this code. So going to open up an editor. So we have, this is all the files in the root of your project. You have an app folder, which is where the bulk of your code is going to go inside the app folder. There's DB, which is your database schema, integrations, public, and a few other things, and then config files. So let's look at in the DB folder, let's go to schema.prisma. And this is what you get by default. So you have the model, the session, and the token for your authentication is in there. And then down here at the bottom, you can see that the project model that we've just added. Okay, so this is your database. So now let's go look at a get project query. Get project query. And I'm just going to reformat this code here slightly to make it a bit easier to see. Okay, so this is a query file, and this is exporting a default function. Okay, so that's all it is, exporting a function. But we have these resolver utilities that allow you to do more complex stuff. And we go ahead and add them in there by default because you're going to want them. So this is a resolver. It's a pipe. It's a functional pipe. And it allows you to just pipe any number of functions together. And it just pipes the input to the output and so forth. So the first thing inside this pipe is resolver.zod. And Zod is a really awesome runtime validation library, like Yup, but better. And so that's what this code right here is a Zod schema. And so we say that the schema, get project schema, is going to be an object, and it's going to have an ID field of number. Okay. And this is going to do input validation on this thing. So we pass the schema here to resolver.zod, and this is going to ensure that the input data matches this format that we've specified. If it doesn't, it'll throw an error. So this is important for security and making sure that your data is correct. And then secondly, we call resolver.authorize. And what this is going to do is going to ensure that the user is logged in. If they're not logged in, is going to throw an authentication error. Now this is going to let user with any role in here, but if we wanted to say that only an admin could access this, we can add admin into that authorize call, and then it will throw, if you're not logged in, it'll throw authentication error. But if you're logged in and you aren't an admin, then it will throw an authorization error and say, sorry, you're not allowed to access this. All right, so then lastly, we have a custom function that will take that input data, and you can see that it's properly typed via TypeScript that has a number. And then here is the fun part where we actually talk to the database. Now this DB object is from Prisma. So we call db.project.findFirst, where the ID is equal to the ID that is passed into it. And then that will return the project object. And then we simply return that from the query. Okay. So it's pretty simple. If you're new to it, it kind of looks like a lot, but just spend a little bit of time with it and it'll start to make sense. Now I want to show you this thing, this DB object from Prisma. So you can see that we get autocomplete for there's project, we can say user, there is what else, token, and it's auto completed. So that's super cool. And then including the input arguments, and see it knows that this yeah, what that can be. And then there's project, the result is also properly typed. So this ID name created at, and this comes from your database schema. Okay, just without you doing anything. All right, so let's go look at how this thing is used on the front end. Okay, so this file, this thing we export right here, we're going to import this into our component, which is the project ID page. And here is this fourth line, get project, is that function that we were just looking at. Okay, so we just import that here and we pass it to our use query hook, which comes from Blitz. And that's all you do. Okay, there's no other API endpoints or fetching or anything. That's all you do. And then this will use query hook will return that project, and you can see that this is that project type. So it's exactly what we returned is what you get on the front end. This use query hook is built on top of React query. So you might have heard about that. It's super awesome for managing the caching, cache invalidation. You can do like polling, all sorts of things. So super powerful, and that's how that works. So then we can just take this project and just render it just like a normal React. Okay. All right. Now let's look at mutations. So you can see here we also imported delete project mutation, and there is a use mutation hook. So very similar thing. We just passed that delete project mutation to this hook, and then it returns a little function that we can call. So down here in our own click handler, we call this delete project mutation. And you can see that this is also properly typed via TypeScript. So it should be an ID of number, and we just call that thing. And once it's done, then we know it's deleted and we redirect to the projects page. So that's super slick. Let's go look at that delete project mutation. So this is the same thing. We have this resolver.pipe, resolver.authorize, and then inside here we call db.project.delete mini, and that will delete that thing. And we have that same Zod schema, etc. Okay, so pretty simple, and it just works. And so yeah, I wanted to highlight that this TypeScript works end to end. So this is like a huge benefit. Whereas if you're using GraphQL or something, you have to have a separate process running that's like automatically regenerating the types anytime you change something, where here it's just static. You don't have to have a process sitting there. So it's just amazing. It's so nice of a developer experience. We built a custom serialization library. So something that happens in like a normal API is if you have a date object on the server, you have to convert that to a string to send over HTTP. And then whenever you receive that on the client, you have to convert that date or that string back to a date if you want to manipulate it, right? And it's just so annoying, and you shouldn't have to do that. And in Blitz, you don't. So we take that, we handle that for you, and we just so if you return a date on the server, it comes out a date on the client. All right. Let's see. I'll mention a couple more things here before I go back to my slides. So something else to mention here is our error handling, which is just like amazing in my opinion. So you know how like you have the try catch model for catching errors in JavaScript, right? You probably know how that works. So we take that same model, the same approach, but apply it to your full stack application. I've never seen this anywhere else. But so what happens is if you throw an error on the server, so in this case, if the project comes back empty, we will throw a new not found error. And what will happen is this error, since there's no try catch here on the server, it will be thrown. So let's go back to this page that we were on. So this use query hook, right? So this is where we're using that thing. And so that error will come from the server through the network, and it'll be thrown out of this use query hook. And there's a thing in React called error boundaries, which you may or may not have used. And we have one set up in the root of your application in _app. And then right here is this error boundary component. And error boundary component is try catch for React. Okay, so this is already in the root of your application. And so what's going to happen is that not found error is going to be caught by this error boundary. So you throw it on the server and then you catch it on the client. It's so cool, right? And then go down here to this fallback component. And this is where you decide what you're actually going to render. And so we say, if this error is an instance of authentication error, then render the login form. Okay, so if you're not, so we don't even have to redirect the user. We just say, just render this login form on the same page. And then as soon as they're logged in, this login form will just disappear. Else if the error is an instance of authorization error, then we'll say, sorry, you're not authorized to access this. And so this is based on whether you're logged in or whether you're logged in but don't have the required role. And then else, if it's neither of those, and we just say, we're going to just say error.status code, default to 400, and then error.message. And so this is it's going to use a 404 code here in this case to say the page is not found. Okay, so we've thought a lot about this, and it's pretty awesome experience. All right, let's go back to my slides, and we'll be wrapping up here soon. All right, so one other thing that's awesome in Blitz is Blitz recipes. This allows you to install third-party code with one command. And this is most common for installing third-party libraries. So for example, Tailwind. Tailwind requires a couple dependencies. It requires Tailwind, post CSS, and some configuration files, and so forth. And so with Blitz, you can run Blitz install Tailwind. You just run that in the command line, hit enter, and it will automatically install those dependencies for you. And it will create the configuration files and add the CSS import into your code. Now, you can also do Blitz install Chakra UI, and it will do the same thing, but it will also add the theme provider into your root of your application. And it'll do that automatically for you. So it's super nice and easy. And we don't have a lot of these recipes yet, but anybody can write them, and we're having more and more added all the time. Another cool thing is Blitz console. So you run that from your terminal, and it opens a node REPL, and it automatically loads some of your code, like your database object. So you can run await db.project.question or whatever your model is .find many in this Blitz console, and it'll just use your database and return exactly what you want. So I use this in production, for example, to debug production issues or update some code or run something. So that's really cool too. And this is inspired by Ruby on Rails, and I've always missed it in JavaScript land, but here it is. All right. A few other notable features. We have a Passport.js adapter that lets you easily add social login to your app. So if you want to do like Twitter login, GitHub login, whatever, we have an adapter that allows you to just drop that in, and then it just works, but it uses the Blitz built-in authentication. And so it works together really nicely. We have HTTP middleware support for your queries and mutations. We have advanced data serialization, which I talked about, where we automatically serialize the date for you. Also classes, maps, sets, errors, etc. It's all properly serialized or deserialized and serialized the other way. You can deploy to a server or serverless, although serverless is still the Wild West right now. So most people aren't doing it because they run into too many issues, but that will get better. But it's nice to know that you can deploy to a server or serverless without changing any of your application code. And so that possibility to switch environments is there. It's super nice to have. We do support a custom server. So if you need WebSockets or some other really advanced stuff, we support that. And then we're database agnostic. So you can use any database you want. You don't have to use Prisma. We just give you Prisma by default. All right, so this is super cool. One of our early Blitz users, this was last fall when he said this. He said, I used Ruby on Rails professionally for over a decade, and I feel 10 times more productive on Blitz already after just a few months. And I just think that's amazing that like we're exceeding Rails, right? At least for people who love JavaScript and don't really like Ruby, then it's so you can see that we're well, I'll just move on to this one. So this is someone who works at Ogolia. They tried to use AWS Amplify for an internal tool, but they ended up switching to Blitz, and then they were just like, they're so much faster. And they're now working on a second internal tool using Blitz because it's just so fast. And so yeah, people are saying in general, people are saying the Blitz is like 5 to 10 times faster than using other stuff. So it's pretty cool. All right, you can try Blitz now. This is your homework. Run npm i-g blitz, and secondly, run blitz new my app. That's all it is. 2 commands, and you will have a new Blitz app running, and then you can just run blitz dev, and it'll start up. It'll tell you what to do, and then you're off to the races, and you can make your next startup and be a millionaire. All right, we need your help. We're an open source project, and so we love contributions. You can become involved as much as you want. So it's still very early days. Don't think that like Blitz is already done. It's still like there's still so much left to do. And so it's a great project to get in early and get involved. You can become a maintainer. We have 2 levels, well, actually 3 levels. We have a core team, which is for people who are like really involved on a regular basis. We have level 2 maintainers who have code ownership over certain parts of the code base. And then level 1 maintainers who are sort of like help with triage, issue triage, answer questions in the community and so forth. But you don't even have to have any of those official things. Just come and help, and it's super appreciated. You can help with code, documentation, videos, blog posts, courses, books, all those sort of things are appreciated. And then lastly, donations and sponsorships. You can sponsor Blitz for as little as $5 a month, or if you have companies, then you can sponsor as a company to get your logo right on the front page and on the front page of the README. So to go to blitz.js.com/docs/contributing if you're interested in that. And the blitz.js.com is the place to go to find out more information about Blitz. All the documentation is there. And check it out. Oh, I still didn't. Okay. I got to add the link to these slides. Free stickers. I have free stickers for you all. If you go to, I'll put this link in the chat too. So blitz.js.com/stickers, and put in your name and address, and we will send you free stickers anywhere in the world. We just started sending them out a couple weeks ago. So we do have a backlog. So it might take a month or 2 till you get them, but you will get them. Okay. And then if you're interested in keeping up with what I'm doing, you can follow me at Flybear on Twitter. And then Blitz_JS is the Blitz Twitter handle. And that is all I have. And I will be happy to answer any questions. It's a good thing I'm like virtually. So if you didn't like it, you can't hit me with rotten apples.
Thanks a lot, Brendan. It is really amazing. I mean, like the possibilities that I can think of when I saw the presentation.